Amanpour Fahmy, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Christiane. I'm happy to be here.
In the wake of the U.S. cutting a certain amount of military aid to Egypt, you said that relations with the U.S. are in turmoil, and your office has said that this decision is wrong. Tell me what you mean.
Well, actually, I gave the statement in Arabic, and it's closer to that we're going through turbulence rather than turmoil. What I meant, and I'm serious about it, and I will say it again if asked again, is that this has been a relationship that has a continuity to it, especially on strategic issues like military cooperation. And any disruption in that continuity raises concerns. That's really what I meant. I also said in the same statement that this is a very important relationship to both countries and that we need to work to enhance it because it serves both sides. And we will on our side.
What negative repercussions will this cutoff in aid have? You yourself have said that it will have negative repercussions for U.S. interests in the region. What are those, and what negative repercussions for Egypt?
There's no, first of all, it's not a cutoff. It's a freeze or a delay in delivering equipment. That's the first point. Secondly, even that, which is much less than a cutoff, indicates that you cannot depend on the continuity of the programs, and these are programs that relate to national security. That's why they become a serious question. Now, if your friends in the region, when they're facing terrorism in particular, cannot depend on a continuous supply of equipment that deals with terrorism, then you're obviously going to raise questions in the minds of your friends about your dependability, and that will affect your interests as well as that of your friends like Egypt.
Let me play you a portion of what President Obama said just before this partial cutoff of military aid. And of course, let's remind everybody that Egypt is the second largest recipient of American aid in the region after Israel. And I guess America is one of your biggest donors or biggest partners in this regard. Let's listen to President Obama.
I think what most Americans would say is that we have to be very careful about being seen as aiding and abetting actions that we think run contrary to our values and our ideals. There's no doubt that we can't return to business as usual given what's happened.
So, Mr. Foreign Minister, what's happened, of course, was the shooting of anti-government protesters, not just in July, but also this past month, in October, this past week or so. The imprisonment, all of those things the president is saying go against U.S. and, in fact, democratic values. What is your answer to that? Because it looks like the U.S. has been pushed into this partial cutoff. It didn't do it right after the events of July 3rd when the president was deposed.
I think what you need to take into account is that Egypt is going through a societal transformation and trying to build democratic society. What I mean here specifically is, while we in last year elected a president through a democratic process, he did not then govern democratically and wanted to pursue non-inclusive politics. What we're trying to do now is rewrite a constitution that includes all of us, then hold two elections, parliament and president. So this is a historic transformation in Egypt. It's not going to be easy. There will be ups and downs. And I would simply mention that what we're trying to do almost is a miracle in comparison to how long and how many stumbles other countries went through before they developed their democracy, including the United States, by the way.
Let me just push you, though, on what President Obama has said and the stumbles, as you call them, that you're experiencing right now. Of course, we saw in neighboring Tunisia an ability for both sides to actually compromise. The Islamic-led government did step down pending the constitution. It's not the same in Egypt. What you've done is deposed the democratically elected government, for whatever reason you say. But that is clearly something that the U.S. is finding more and more difficult to stomach, given the amount of death that is coming with it. So many in Egypt who actually supported what happened in July are now saying, hang on a second, it's going too far. The military is becoming all-powerful. This is even more draconian than under the Mubarak era. Do you admit at least that there have been mistakes made by the military, by your current interim government?
Look, as I said, this is a major, very substantive societal transformation. The reason why I don't compare it to Tunisia was that had the previous government compromised with the non-Islamists, we wouldn't be where we are today, and there wouldn't have been a reason to depose the president. What the people wanted at the time was new elections, to have an inclusive government. What we're facing now is a result of having to depose two presidents in 2.5 years. So it is a major challenge. But the challenge, frankly, is not about pleasing the United States or pleasing the West. It's about finding a democratic system that includes all Egyptians. That's the task. That's what we're trying to do. Will there be mistakes? There obviously will be points of tension, points of controversy, but you have to look at the overall context of what's happening and how significant it is. Again, if I refer you back to the US system, it took you a very long number of years before you gave African Americans equal rights in America. So let's just respect how difficult it is being. This is the challenge is we're facing here. But we will move forward and we will pursue an inclusive government for all Egyptians that are peaceful and looking to build a modern state in Egypt.
Do you think the trial, the upcoming trial of former President Morsi will create a backlash and more tension?
Well, in that case in particular, for lack of a better term, we're between a rock and a hard place. If there's no trial, then people will argue that you cannot hold somebody under arrest without putting him before the courts. And I agree with that. Once you put him to trial, obviously it would raise tensions, but we have to respect the law. We have to allow for due diligence. We have to provide people a due process and the right to defend themselves, and that's what's going to happen. It's going to be a difficult phase, but following the law, as difficult as it may be, is better than ignoring the law, which we cannot accept in a democratic state.
Let me move on to elections. You talked about a constitutional process. We were told by a senior government official, Mr. Higazi, not so long ago, that there are bound to be parliamentary elections and maybe even presidential elections in the summer. First, I want to know whether you agree with that time frame.
Yes, the roadmap says that within a maximum of 9 months, starting last July, we have to announce the last phase, which is the elections for president. So that means by the end of spring, you announce the date for the elections for president, and that normally happens within 6 to 7 weeks. So you're looking at early summer. So yes, what Mr. Higazi was mentioning is consistent with the roadmap that was adopted in July.
And now, what about the all-powerful leader of Egypt today, which is the Defense Minister, General al-Sisi? There is a cult of personality developing around him. You go into, I'm interested to read about even confectionery shops making his likeness out of chocolate and other such things. But slightly more seriously, a tape has been leaked showing that he is trying to get positive coverage by the media in Egypt, even to the extent of allowing him to present himself for president, or if he doesn't make it, to go back to his current job and having that guaranteed under the Constitution. What is your reaction to that? Will he run for president? Is that a good idea?
Well, first of all, let me answer the first part of your question. There's no doubt that the Egyptian army, led by General al-Sisi, gained tremendous support publicly because of what happened last July when the former president was disposed. And that's a reflection of the anger the public had about having their rights taken away from them again after they had regained them a year and a half earlier in 2011. So I think it's a reflection of the challenge that was before the Egyptian people. Now, does the general have support of the people in that respect? Yes, he does. But the most powerful person and the most powerful lobby, if you want, in Egypt today is the Egyptian people. It's not a person per se. We will have democratic elections for parliament and for president, and the people will choose who the next leader will be.
Do you think it's appropriate that General al-Sisi present himself as a presidential candidate?
When we get to that phase, we'll see what the Constitution says. We haven't even finished that yet. What the election law says, we haven't done that either. So let's just get to that point, and then we'll see what the population will say after looking at the Constitution, and the law will be what guides us.
Regarding American military aid, the cutoff in some of that aid, there is also from the Army speculation or suggestion that you might turn to Russia to make up the shortfall. Is that correct?
Our national security needs will be met. A very strong portion of that is now being done with the U.S., and we would be quite happy and look forward to continuing to do that. If they are not met, then we will find other sources.
The U.S. says, and Secretary Kerry says, you'll get it back, but it's performance-based. Are you in talks with the U.S. about that?
We will be in talks. We haven't yet gotten into formal talks. You had a shutdown for the last week or so, so there wasn't really an opportunity to discuss these issues. But of course, as I said, our strongest supporter in these areas has been the U.S., and we look forward to having a good relationship with the U.S. and dealing with these systems again. So we will have these discussions. I have no problem with wanting a democracy in Egypt. That is our objective as well. We will pursue that. But the decision on that will be done by Egyptians. I don't see linkages on national security issues to be appropriate. And that's what the Foreign Ministry said when the decision was taken.
How bad is it in the Sinai? Obviously, that seems to be a repercussion from what's the political crisis in Egypt. How bad is al-Qaeda and the attacks on the military in the Sinai?
There are very significant challenges in the Sinai. Just recently, you saw a suicide bomber in one part of the Sinai. There were at least 25 officers, off-duty officers and soldiers killed, and several military and police headquarters attacked in the Sinai. So there was obviously a terrorist threat. It's not throughout the Sinai, but in certain areas, and it tends to target where the authority is. So it's a serious problem, and we have a terrorist threat, and we will deal with it. But we will do that in accordance with the law.
The new government after July 3rd wanted also to give some aura of stability, of economic revival, of bringing back tourists. There's been anything but stability since July 3rd, since the interim government took over. Do you think you failed to convince the rest of the world that actually Egypt is now stable and a place for investment and tourists?
I disagree with you, Christiane. On the issue of tourism, actually tourism has started to come back. It's not where it should be because we've had incidents of violence, we've had cases of violence, and when there are losses of life, and I frankly regret all of them, irrespective of their political inclinations, it is a tragic issue, and that affects tourism. But tourism has started to come back. Investments are still a bit slow, although the economy, with a very aggressive inflow of funds, both from the government as well as from our supporters in the Arab world, is starting to pick up, but it's not where it should be.
And finally, Amnesty International and many are looking at the refugees coming from Syria, and they have issued a statement saying that the Egyptian government should end this sort of detention and deportation of these refugees. What is your answer to that, and why are you doing that?
Well, first of all, we have a security problem, as you yourself mentioned, so obviously security authorities will be very sensitive to influxes of foreigners who don't have valid visas. Those who have valid visas are allowed to come in without a problem. Those who are sent back are those who arrive without valid visas or through illegal means. In other circumstances, we used to be much more receptive to Arab refugees, and frankly, we have over 300,000 Syrian refugees today in Egypt. So it's a difficult issue because these are, at the end of the day, from the Arab family, and they've always found Egypt to be receptive. but we have a difficult problem on security. So we're trying to square the circle there.
Foreign Minister Fahmy, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.